Hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar, SharePoint 2013 New Web Content and Publishing Features. I'd like to introduce Stephen Allen, who will be presenting our content for today. Stephen, go ahead.
Great. Welcome everyone who will be watching this webinar. I'd like to introduce myself to start. My name is Stephen Allen. I'm an instructor at QuickStart and out of our Bellevue office primarily. I've been teaching here at essentially QuickStart since February 2003, teaching Windows Server, scripting, SharePoint, and SQL Server. Pretty much teach all the SharePoint content except for the high-end developer stuff on SharePoint. So that's a bit about my background. What I'd like to share with you today is a few features that Microsoft has put into SharePoint 2003 to help organizations develop and share web-based content, primarily through the publishing feature, but additionally through some extensions they put into their asset library and some new features that they put into the 2013 version around a new web part that shows and displays information and content that's been indexed by the search service. It's highly customizable. So we're going to go through basically in this order, though asset libraries come a bit later. Asset libraries are in SharePoint Foundation. Most of the features we're going to look at here, device channels, design manager, and image and video renditions, are part of the standard edition and the publishing feature that comes with that. And then the last part, the cross-site publishing and the content by search web part, are all part of the enterprise edition of SharePoint. And correspondingly, for those of you who may have Office 365, SharePoint Online, these features are part of the corresponding versions of SharePoint Online. The E1, sorry, the lower level introductory versions of SharePoint Office Online will have the asset library features. Some of the next level up will have the publishing features, and the enterprise level 3 and 4, the government level 3 and 4, academic level 3 and 4, those should have the content by search web parts. Now, they were added later into Office 365 and were not part of the initial 2013 upgrade. They are there now. All right, now we're going to start with device channels. One of the challenges that organizations have started to have, or actually for the last several years, developing websites, is how do we account for and handle and optimize the rendering and display of our website when we have such a large range of devices that the people are using. 10 years ago, well over 99% were computers connected to monitors with some standard resolutions. Even widescreen monitors weren't common in that environment, and it was fairly easy to develop a web page. Now we have smartphones and tablets and iPads, and we still have desktops. We have widescreen monitors that are becoming much more common, and we need better tools to develop those web pages so that we maximize the user experience, particularly if we're doing some kind of e-commerce type solution. In the industry as a whole, one of the methods that the industry has gone to enable this type of rendering and display is something called responsive design, by using cascading style sheets in JavaScript that can inspect, say, the size of the web browser window and re-render the page. We can give a nice, clean display for that particular of the content for that particular device with the browser window the size that it is. And there's several advantages that we'll talk how device channels, which is an alternate or an additional tool that Microsoft has provided to us in SharePoint to enable targeting content and HTML to particular types of devices. So in SharePoint 2013, they've given us this thing called a device channel, where you can set up a channel, and in that channel you can specify alternate master pages. So in SharePoint, if you're not familiar, master pages control the overall structure and layout of the page that gets rendered to the user in their device. So the master page controls the overall branding, if you will. We also have style sheets that we can apply different style sheets based on the different devices. We'll get to how that's done in just a moment. You can also choose different images or renditions of those images that are provided to the client. So someone accessing on a smartphone who may only be able to see a small version of an image, there's no sense, for example, to sending down the much larger image that someone on a desktop might want to see. It's going to take longer to load, and time to load a page is a big issue. It also is going to take a lot more bandwidth, and our customers or users are going to be much happier with sites that take just the bandwidth required. That's something, particularly because the content can change based on the target device, that's a big advantage over the other forms of responsive web design using cascading style sheets and JavaScript, where we download the whole file and then on the client determine how that image is rendered. Now we, in these device channels, then set up a list of target devices that we want that channel to be rendered to. And it's based on the user agent strings. And you can be as specific or as generic as you want with the user agent string. You can go down to the very specific device, or a user agent string that contains a phrase in it. You can have single devices, so you can create a channel for a single device or for a group of devices. You can also have a fallback mobile channel for any device that's a mobile device. It's part of the user agent string, but you have not explicitly included in any other of your device channels. So you might, for example, let's say as an organization, have standardized on a particular brand of tablet, say an iPad 2. And you want to have a particular view of your pages rendered to an iPad 2, you can do that. You can set up a device channel for that single device, and you could have a fallback mobile channel for everything else. Or you could create additional channels for certain classes of devices. The content in the page layout. So in SharePoint, right, we've talked about the master page. When we request a page in SharePoint, SharePoint's going to return a master page, which is the overall structure of the page. It's going to return, since we're talking publishing pages here with device channels, it's going to return a page layout, which is, it's like an intermediate page. It's not quite a master page, but it's not quite the page content, though we put the content in the page layout. And that page layout, it will only render the content that we've configured to render in that channel. There's special content placeholders in the page layout that you can set up. And then in each of those content placeholders for device channel, you can list the device channels you want that particular component to render on. So if it's a iPad 2 or say a Samsung Tab 10 or a desktop, you may want to go ahead and render all this content. So you'd have those device channels listed on all the panels, the device channel panels. For, I don't know, a Samsung Galaxy S device, you would you would say, we only want these 4 pieces to be rendered to that device. It's a smaller screen, and we want to optimize the experience for users using those devices. So there's things that we can do with device channels. A few more comments I want to make on those. Device channels are only available in SharePoint publishing sites. This should only be an issue if you don't have SharePoint Standard Edition. You will, how do I say this? Publishing sites give you by far the highest level of control and flexibility, and we can create any kind of SharePoint page in a publishing site. If you have SharePoint Standard, with the exception of a few of the other standard site templates, you really do want to use the publishing sites, publishing feature. It allows you to customize master pages, create publishing sites, use this device channels and image renditions and video renditions, and the design manager. Those things we're going to talk about a little bit later. Some limitations. You can only have 10 device channels per site, and only 150 inclusion rules per channel. So if you are doing specific full user agent streams, that'd be 1,500 user agent streams. But since you can match more generic terms, the 10 device channel limit isn't really a big deal. You'll likely find that you're not going to want to get anywhere close to 10 device channels, because these can add additional overhead when you're managing your site. Every device channel you configure separate master pages for, and then you have to update and maintain those master pages. So 2, 3, 4 device channels, probably going to be the more optimal solution, rather than going all the way up to here to 10. Now, please understand, these device channels are not a security mechanism. It's going to show the content for that device channel based on the user agent string, which is a combination of the browser, the device, sometimes the Windows resolution. Sorry, it's not going to be the browser resolution. That you do that through responsive to web design, but it's the device and the browser. User agent strings can be changed by the user by changing a query string parameter or by changing a cookie. So the user can actually change their agent string and potentially see a different channel. So don't use channels to target specific content that you need security on. This is, again, just a mechanism to help us optimize the user experience that the user is going to see when they browse that site on their device. And part of that user experience improvement is to optimize the performance of the solution by reducing the content that has to be sent down to the device and the size of the images and so on. Now, I'd like to compare responsive web design using cascading style sheets in JavaScript with device channels. And I want to emphasize here that you are not restricted to choosing one or the other. You can actually mix these. For example, you could use responsive web design for a lot of your initial design and control, but use device channels where it's most useful, targeted to specific devices. All right, now in responsive web design, it's the resolution of the device, the browser window, that's going to control what gets rendered. Whereas device channels, it's the device. So if there was a tablet computer, for example, where the user could resize their browser window, responsive web design is going to probably render that better than a device channel. Or perhaps even better, a device channel combined with responsive web design. An example of responsive web design is the ribbon in SharePoint itself, where based on the size of your browser window, specifically the horizontal width, the ribbon will render differently. It'll collapse large icons into small icons. It'll start hiding the text, so you have to get the tooltip to hover the mouse over that item. It'll start combining items into menus, flyout menus that you click on, and then you get another menu. That's one example of a responsive web design. In device channels, the rendering in the HTML is fixed for that device, regardless of the size of the browser window. So they're different in that way. With device channels, you can have different master pages, different page layouts, and the page layouts can filter the content that's actually sent down to the device. So where you might want to send a very rich, with a lot of content page down to someone using a desktop computer, and a much more restricted set of content down to, say, a smartphone, with responsive web design, all that content is sent to every device, and it's filtered in the browser what actually gets displayed. So while the user may only see what might have only required 250 kilobytes of data transfer, when they load that page, it might actually transfer 5 megabytes of content. With device channels, because you can actually change the content based on the device, you might only send down that 250 kilobytes of content rather than the 5 megabytes. That's one of the main ways device channels can be very, very useful and quite powerful. And again, you can mix and match. You can use both of these together. Device channels also give you more options because they're more flexible, it's different content, but they're more complex. You have to maintain separate master pages, possibly page layout controls per device. And when you get new devices, or you have users accessing new devices, it may require an update to your device channels. You may have to go add that user agent string to the appropriate device channel. You may have to create a new device channel or edit what's out there for an existing device channel. Whereas responsive web design tends to be very forgiving for new devices because it's just based on the resolution. Also, responsive web design is much more friendly to your internet search engines, as well as certainly your SharePoint internal search engine, because regardless of the device, regardless of the resolution of the web browser, the content's the same with the responsive web design approach using cascading style sheets and JavaScript, because the entire content's sent. With device channels, the content changes by the user agent. So what gets indexed and when users do a search and then they click on the search results, they're going to see what their user agent, their device channel targeted to them, but what the search engine, the internet search engine crawler picked up may have been a different set of content. So it can be less user-friendly from a search perspective using device channels. All right, so that's device channels. Hopefully that gives you an idea of what they are, what they're useful for, how they compare to responsive design, and how you might want to use those. What I want to talk about now is a feature called the Design Manager. The Design Manager was, again, part of the publishing features that go with the device channels, there has been historically a fair number of complaints that we have to do web development in SharePoint, we have to be ASP.NET developers, ASPX developers. But most web developers are not ASP.NET and ASPX developers, they're HTML developers. And we couldn't just take an HTML web designer and say, here you go, let's develop SharePoint. We also typically couldn't take an ASP.NET developer and an ASPX developer and say, here, let's develop for SharePoint. Because they needed to know more than just ASPX and ASP.NET. They really had to be good at HTML design or the types of things that would go into them. So with the Design Manager, Microsoft's goal was to let web designers develop the way that they typically develop using their own preferred HTML design tool. Whichever one you want to use, Microsoft's or Adobe's or any other one out there, to develop your HTML. Then you copy that HTML into the Design Manager, and the Design Manager in SharePoint automatically converts it to ASPX and injects the code needed to build the master pages and page layouts. So SharePoint is doing most of that heavy ASP.NET, ASPX lifting that previous developers had to do for SharePoint 2010 and earlier. And it actually works very, very well. Now, there are some little bits your HTML web designers will need to learn a little bit of ASPX, but it's very, very small. It's nowhere near what they needed to know before. And that little bit is understanding the little SharePoint-specific ASPX stuff. So when you import that, all that code, so when you import it, it converts it to the ASPX, but it injects a bunch of comments that contains that code into the HTML. You're still just, as a web developer, you're still just editing the HTML, and you're pretty much ignoring those comments, other than that they can help a little bit you deciding where you're going to put those SharePoint things. What do I mean by SharePoint things? Well, it's all the little SharePoint controls that are specific to SharePoint that we might want in our page. There's a little snippets page, so you open up a page layout or a master page, preview in the Design Manager, and then there's this interface where you can insert snippets. Snippets might be something as simple as you need to know the site, the relative site URL, or you want to put a SharePoint search box on the page, or you want to insert any of the SharePoint web parts, preloaded in your master page or preloaded in your page layout. And the beauty is it's a graphical interface. You say, okay, I want this control search box. I need it with these settings, rendered this way. And you just choose it from this menu, very similar to how you would configure a web part in SharePoint. And then you copy the code, and you paste that code right into your HTML where you want it. Save the HTML, and to the Design Manager, and the Design Manager does all the necessary conversion back to the ASPX. It's absolutely amazing what they did here, and it makes developing pages for SharePoint much, much easier. In addition, you can take a whole master page or set of master pages, images, style sheets, JavaScript, and page layouts that are part of your design. You can export that design to a WSP file, .WSP file, and import it into other sites. So it's really easy to move your design to other sites and other site collections. You can very easily as well apply that design, that master page, to all the subsites with a publishing feature enabled. It does require the SharePoint publishing feature activated in the site to get the design manager tool, as well as to use it, which also requires the publishing infrastructure at the site collection level and the SharePoint standard feature set to use that. All right, now changing focus a little bit, switching to asset libraries. Now, we've had asset libraries in previous versions of SharePoint, in SharePoint 2010 and I believe 2007, where the asset library was a library optimized to store digital assets. The first couple versions of SharePoint had a picture library. Well, with the massive growth of broadband internet connections and the massive growth of audio and video on the internet, something like 85–90% of all internet traffic now is video, then Microsoft needed to have better support for audio and video files in SharePoint. So they introduced that in the asset library. And we still have that here in 2013, and it's certainly been enhanced. So when we create an asset library, it's pre-configured with 3 content types for storing digital assets: image, audio, and video. So images are meant for photos, audio for audio files, and video certainly for video files. And one of the big enhancements here in SharePoint 2013 is that videos no longer need to be stored in SharePoint. You can link to the video stored elsewhere. What does elsewhere mean? Well, it can just be hosted on a web server. Any kind of web server is a video file out there, and you just use the link to that video. It can be hosted on video streaming services like YouTube and Vimeo and any of the many others out there. And we can embed it using an embed tag, or again, just the URL to the video. That eliminates what a lot of organizations did in previous versions. They would go out and buy a third-party video streaming software and deploy another server and host their videos there. And those products would typically come with their own web parts that would be installed in SharePoint, and then you use those custom third-party web parts. Now it's much, much less likely that as an organization you'll have to buy additional software to support video. The capabilities here in SharePoint 2013 are going to match almost all organizations' needs for managing video. One of the nice things here that we get with the linked to the video in this way is that link is still part of the asset library using the video content type, which means even though we don't actually have the video files stored in SharePoint, we get a document in our asset library that acts as that video in terms of, or for the purposes of capturing metadata. So those videos, even though they're stored outside of SharePoint, we can still have metadata tagging and search and workflows and retention policies and all the other things that, and metadata navigation, content by search, all the tools that SharePoint gives us for working with items with tagged metadata. So it's the best of both worlds. It's as if the video is stored in SharePoint, but it's not actually stored in SharePoint. It's linked elsewhere. I'll show you in a little demo here how that works. We also get, just through the standard Sharepoint RSS list feed for audio and video content types, built-in podcasting support. As long as we choose the right columns when we set up the RSS feed, then users can connect to that list as a podcast. It's really kind of nice. All right, now digital asset file types. These are the file types that are going to give you the most support, or Sharepoint has the most support for. If you have file types of other types, you'll either want to convert them to these, or that's the scenario where you might still want to get a third-party video storage or streaming server. So GIFs and JPEGs and bitmaps and PNG files and WMF files and TIFF files, all supported here for automatic metadata extraction as well as thumbnail creation. Of course, you can upload any image type you want. You're just not going to get the thumbnails or the metadata extraction automatically if it's not one of those file types. For audio files, we have the Sharepoint built-in media web part, which supports MP3, OGG, and WMA files, though the OGG file type is only supported using HTML5 media web part. Video file types, ASF, is the flash files, AVI, MPG, MP4, OGV, WebM, and WMV. Pretty much all the standard file types, the exception being the FLV and QuickTime file formats. Those you'd want to convert those or have some, again, third-party video editing software. AVI, MPG, OGV, and the WebM, again, require the HTML5 media web part, as opposed to the older Silverlight web part. The only real reason you'd use the Silverlight web part now is if not all of your users had an HTML5 web browser, but they had Silverlight. But remember, Silverlight only works on Windows devices, some Apple devices, but not Android devices. HTML5 will work across all three of those as long as the browser is an HTML5 web browser. All right, so what I'd like to do now is show you accessing or adding a video to an asset library. We'll do some images in just a moment. So I'm going to switch over to this virtual machine I have running here that has a site that I want to add some content to. Now this is the home page for a publishing site, publishing portal. So it's got the publishing features enabled, not that they're necessarily required for asset libraries, though we get some nice features that we're going to talk about in just a moment when we do have the publishing features activated. So I'm going to first open up my site contents. And from the site contents, we're going to go into the out-of-the-box images library. So in the publishing portal, we have an asset library already called images. If you don't have an asset library, it's very simple to create one. Add an app. Choose the asset library template. So there's my asset library. Notice that we still have the picture library template. The picture library template is still here to support the Sharepoint picture slideshow web part, the slideshow web part. The only thing you should be using picture libraries for. You should be using asset libraries now for all other storage of images. The functionality available to the picture library is available through a slight customization of the content search web part, and you actually have more control, more options that way, but it does require some minor JavaScript in there. All right, so let's go back to site content. We're going to choose the images library. Currently have 0 items here. In my image library. And now, a couple things that we're going to want to do. I don't really have a local image that I can upload, though it's very similar to what we've had in previous versions. You just upload that image file, or we'll do images, video file, and then use it. What I really want to show you is the new ability to link to video files. So I've opened up YouTube to the Quick Start YouTube channel, and let's say I wanted to add a video that, so we got this nice video here that gives a little introduction to one of our classes, in this case the SQL 2012 database class, MS10775. So I'll go ahead and click on that video. Don't really want to play that right here. What I want to do is get this video so that I can display it or add it to my site. So I'm going to click Share down below, and I can just take this URL right here and copy that. But I can be a little smarter as well. If I click the Embed tag, then I can actually choose what video size I want to use for my video, including a custom size. So let's say that I really want to do the 960 by 720. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that embed tag now. Not sure why this hasn't opened yet. And we're going to link this video using that embed tag. And you'll see that we can set all the rest of the metadata that we would on a video that we uploaded and stored locally. While we're waiting for that to load, I'm just going to segue right back to our next section, where it's just a continuation of talking about these images and video files in our asset libraries. With the publishing feature, so that those assets that I'm talking about, those just require a Sharepoint foundation. This next section, image and video renditions, does require the publishing feature. But what they allow us to do is basically tag different versions of a digital asset, specifically an image and a video file. And by using those different versions, we can optimize performance, minimize the bandwidth use of that asset. Two different ways. We'll see here with image and video renditions, they're actually two different things, and they work two different ways, but they can give us that functionality. And they can help us minimize the administrative overhead of having to manage multiple unconnected file versions. Now, the first thing that we have to do, if we want to use these, is make sure that all the supporting features for image and video renditions have successfully been enabled. First, you're going to need the publishing infrastructure and the publishing feature. Since we're using a publishing portal, that's handled for us. The second thing we have to do is make sure that the blob cache for the Sharepoint web application is turned on. So as the farm administrator, your farm administrator will have permission to do that. It's actually very simple for them to do. Let me show you that real quick here. There's our image library. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. So I'm going to launch here IIS Manager, which is the management tool for managing the web server. And I'm going to find the site that I want to enable this on. And I actually want to enable this here on my intranet.contoso.com. It's got my portal site in it. That's the one I want to enable this for. So I'm going to right-click here, and I'm going to say I want to explore, and I'm going to edit the web config file. And what you're looking for choose a different program here. There's an entry in here for the blob cache. All one word, blob cache. First entry is the code that runs it. The second entry is the actual configuration setting. Now, the blob cache is a feature that SharePoint uses to optimize, let me increase the font size here, to optimize the caching of digital files. So we don't have to constantly be going back to the SharePoint database in order to get those files. So if we've read them once and they're very unlikely to change, there's no reason for us to go back to the database and read them again if we can cache them on the web server. By default, however, the blob cache is disabled. You can see that right here, where the enabled equals false. All I have to do is change this to true and save the file, and our blob cache is going to work just fine for us. Before I do that real quick, let's open up our... Nope. Not sure why we still have that. Yeah, so image renditions, you will find image renditions underneath the look and fill where you can manage those image renditions. And you'll notice here, zoom in here, this big red warning, the blob cache is not enabled in this web application. You must have the blob cache enabled for this to work. Back out. We'll go over here, we'll enable this. True, save that file. Let me refresh the page. It is not necessary to restart that web application or its application flow or IIS in order for that change to take effect. When you save that file, SharePoint should pick up the configuration change and automatically enable that blob cache for us. Now, let that go ahead and run. And we will talk more about what these things are. Starting with video renditions. So video renditions are different versions of a video file. It actually is a different video. And what you can do with the different video files, so these are separate files, have to be uploaded, is the different versions can be different file types. So you can convert the files into different file types to support different target devices, different players, if you will. You can also convert them into different resolutions, with the idea that you choose one as the default, usually a low resolution version, that is rendered to all devices accessing that page, but users can request a different version of that video, different resolution, or a different file type for their device. Maybe it doesn't work so well as an MP4 on their device. It works much better as a flash file, or usually that's the reverse. It doesn't work so well as an ASF file. Works better as an MP4 file, and they can select that rendition that they want. Now, these are actually separate video files, and you must convert them outside of SharePoint. And you can't, when you set up your content on your pages, cannot put different renditions onto different pages. So you can't have a different rendition per device channel. It's always going to load that default rendition. Presumably, they're going to give us the flexibility in a future version, at least I'm hoping, to choose a different rendition based on a different device channel or on a different page. We have that capability in our image renditions. So an image rendition, single image that we can dynamically crop and resize to our specification. And it's cached in the blob cache. Why the blob cache is required. So basically what an image rendition does is we set up certain resolutions, numbers of pixels, and we can go in and we can customize those renditions right in the web browser, say how we want to crop it, and then SharePoint will crop that image from the source image, crop it and resize it, actually resize it, much like you would do in Photoshop or some other image editing software, and then cache it in the blob cache. So there's no need, very commonly done, we had one image that we needed to crop 4 different ways and resize it 5 ways to store that image 9 different times, each with a slightly different file name, and then we'd have to reference the corresponding file name where we want it on the page. Here we upload one image, it's stored in SharePoint as one image, and the system automatically crops and resizes it for us. Incredibly nice. On each page, every time you embed that image in SharePoint, you can choose which one you want, which rendition to display. The big benefit to this is it can significantly reduce the bandwidth used by images, particularly for mobile access. So let's take a look at these things. All right. So here is my image renditions. And while here, I just want to point these out. So there are 4 image renditions set up out of the box. A 100 by 100 pixel image, a 304 by 100, a 468 by 220, and a 120 by 68. So basically a picture, 3 lines, picture on top, large picture, and template video. Let's say we wanted to create our own image rendition, or you can actually customize those here. So I'm going to click Add New Item. And it's going to ask us what we want to call our rendition and then the height and width. I'm going to say vertical banner. Width, I'm going to say 120, and a height of 600 pixels. So that's going to create just a new specification for what an image rendition called a vertical banner looks like. Let me add another one. I'm going to call it a horizontal banner. We'll say this one is 800 by 120, 800 wide, 120 tall. Go ahead and save that. So I've created a couple new image rendition definitions. The next thing we're going to want for our image renditions is some images that we can load here. So that's we're going to go back to our image library. And before I upload those images, we use image renditions. I do want to come back now that these are loaded and cached and actually add that video that we talked about. So I'm in my images library. If I go up to my files ribbon, I have here in this new document section a menu that I can click and I can choose what I'm going to do is upload an image, I'm going to upload an audio file, or I'm going to upload or link to a video. So I'm going to upload or link to a video. So I can upload from my computer. I could browse and it'll upload it. I could provide a link to a video. And again, as an example, that was the standard share URL. That'd be a link to the video on YouTube. It's just whatever the video file's URL is, on whatever system you're using, you can do that. Or we can do, again, an embed code. So I'm going to paste right here my embed code that says, go get this video off of YouTube using 960 by 720, no frame border, allow full screen. We could change those if we want. Name for the video, MS 10775, description, introduction. I can preview this. And it's just going to load that video right here in the video player. Video web part in SharePoint. Perfect. Go ahead and click OK. And now that's going to add that as a document to my asset library. Didn't actually upload the video. But what it did do is it has all the links here for it is a video. Here's the name. I can add a description. And so it's a 5 class, quick start. Class covers SQL Server 2012 database administration. Whatever I want to put there. Because this is just an item in SharePoint, we could go in and we could add other content, other columns of metadata. And we could tag this. So I could tag with a course number, product like SQL Server 2012, subjects. And if I have this big library of videos, it can make it very easy for us to filter and display those things. Or particularly when we're talking about the content by search web part, then those web parts can be preloaded with videos, links, and such. The users can play right there in that web part based on that metadata tag. Again, even though my video is not actually displayed or stored in SharePoint. You can also set a thumbnail that you want to use for that video. It does not have to be part of the video. You can create your own little graphic file. Right? So click Change Thumbnail, and you just upload a picture. It's the picture you want to use. Well, here, we have the option to manage video renditions. So the user can have multiple renditions in the same video, for example, different playback qualities or formats, and you can click the link to manage renditions. I'm going to click Save here first. It's going to go ahead and save that item in my asset library. There's the video. I could actually just play that video right here on my page. I can also, of course, go and embed this video now on my SharePoint pages. All right, so next thing I want to do is let's go into the I want manage edit properties on this video. And again, here we can go to video renditions, and I can click the link to manage renditions. Manage renditions. All right, it doesn't seem to want to load that for me, but it would load a page where we could then upload different copies of that image, different sizes, etc. And then the user, when we have an image embedded on the page, right, when they're playing that page, they're actually able to choose the rendition they wanted to see. Now I want to look at image renditions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out here to Google Images, and I'm going to do a search for Seattle. Let's say we just opened a brand new Seattle location. And just so I'm not using images I don't have permission to, I'm going to do a usage right search on Google Images labeled for reuse. And now let's see, there's an image right here. There's a great example. It's a very big image. It is 17,000 by 4,000 pixels. There's lots of good things we can get from just this one image. So now I'm going to save this image, save as, and I could save it straight to SharePoint. I'm just going to save it to my desktop. It's a little bit quicker. And in our image library, I will now go upload that image. Click New Item, Browse, find that Seattle JPEG, upload that. It's going to come in as an image, content type, and give it a name. Evening. We'll put tags. Again, those are all indexed by the search service in SharePoint and can be used to help find those images. Add comments and author, date, picture taken. If the author and date, picture taken are part of the metadata, it will include that too. If there's a copyright notification, license. I think this one is licensed under the Creative Commons license. Go ahead and click Save. Now that's a very big, very large image file. All right, if I open up the properties here, this is a 14 megabyte file. 14 megabyte file, that's not really a file that we want to render on our own pages. But now notice what I can do. I can come in here, you see that right there. And we can manage. I clicked the little ellipse button. Oh, come on. Why is it not giving me the flyout menu? Open menu. I can edit renditions. So we have the different versions here of our renditions. So right now I it's only showing me this 2 possible renditions. There we go. So it's loading it. So this is what it's thinking it's going to do for those renditions. So for the 100 by 100, it's doing this, and I can actually click to change this. And this is actually rendition equals 1. Notice the URL. Whoops. Notice the URL. It's the image question mark rendition ID, and then the ID of the rendition. This is a large file, so it takes a while to open it. But once this opens, I can actually just click and drag and select the piece of the image that I want. Let me get a smaller image. It can work with, might load faster. This isn't the fastest SharePoint server that I have here. We're in a virtual environment. All right, this is only 4 megabytes. This should go faster. Editing our renditions. So this rendition, this 100 by 100 file size, right? It wanted to crop it to that size and then shrink it. I can adjust that here and say, you know, I actually wanted to use that instead. And again, what it's going to do when we load the page, it'll open that image where we have this rendition set. It'll open that image. It will crop it, resize it to 100 by 100 pixels, cache it in the blob cache, and then it's the 100 by 100 pixel image that gets sent down to the client. For the vertical banner, I'll just do one more here. For the vertical banner here, say I want to use this. Right here, spacing is kind of iconic here for Seattle. Works very well. And I can go through and I could actually change those different renditions. Actually, let me just do this one too real quick. And let's use this section right here. That rendition. It actually goes ahead and changes that. Now let me create a page. Seattle location. We just opened a Seattle location, let's say. And now on this page, we can go and we can insert our different renditions. Just quick and dirty, I'm gonna add a little table here. And up here in this cell, I'm gonna insert my picture from SharePoint. This one here. And it's going to insert the full-sized image. But on the image itself, I can actually then just pick the rendition that I want to use. The horizontal banner. Just to show you the different image sizes, I will then insert this same image. And for this rendition, we'll pick the vertical banner. You can edit renditions right there as well. And then for this one, we'll leave it as is. The full copy of the image. We go ahead and click Save. There's our page using different renditions. Each page, each time you insert that image, you can choose a different rendition you want to use. This is actually not showing the full size. It's actually been shrunk dynamically in the browser. If I press F12 here and open up my F12 SharePoint tools, or not SharePoint tools, Internet Explorer tools, where is it? That's it. But if I turned on show the image size, we would actually see that these images are much smaller and actually been resized to that size. This would be the full pixels for that image. I'm not quite sure where they are in this version of Internet Explorer. But these would be much smaller in file size. They'd be probably on the order of, let me save this picture. Spelled up, but I have this. See, it's the vertical banner, and it is 120 by 600, exactly what I told it to be. And file size, it's only 14 kilobytes rather than the full 4 megabytes. Nice big benefits there. All right, one last real quick topic I want to mention, and that's the content by search web part and cross-site publishing. So what Microsoft did is they enabled this feature called cross-site publishing, where we can take content that's authored in one site collection, but display it in another site collection in a very customizable, very highly controlled way of presenting that information. Content authors can author the content in their own sites and surface where appropriate. This can even go across SharePoint forms. There's a product catalog that's there and that can help you in some cases to architect your content. One great example that I've seen is, let's say that we had internally a department site for each department, where the manager of that department has a list where they put any job openings that are available in his or her department, tagged with appropriate content, department name, and all of that. SharePoint, and that might be across 20 different sites in separate site collections, perhaps. Well, search is going to crawl that content, and then on a single site, we have one going to many, but we could have many going to one. On a single site, we could create, say, on our public farm or our public site content under HR, here's all the job listings open in our company, all organized and sorted in one site. It may even be one page using the content by search web part, where based on the link the user clicked on, say a particular department, they'll see all the job listings for that department. Look at another department, the content changes, because this web part that's displaying those job listings is getting those from search, and this search query can take metadata from the link or the page the user's on. One page developed using that one web part, and the contents can change dramatically, considerably, and the display of that content can change as well. So it's a very nice feature, Enterprise Edition only, really enables a lot of advanced roll-up sites. One of the holy grail for internet sites and even many e-commerce sites is to have search-driven content. You don't have to give all these different authors permissions to edit pages and announcements and such on your high-level intranet site. They can author that content in their site, and that content's automatically aggregated by building pages that use these search web parts and just display that content. And remember that SharePoint search is all security trimmed as well, so users are not even going to see items in the search web parts that they don't even have permissions to see. And I want to leave you with a sample site that Microsoft built showing off some of the capabilities of the content search web parts. So here's a page, SharePoint page. It's one page, whether you click on however you want to look at this. And it just has a series of content by search web parts. So there's a content search web part at the top. Another one down below showing those 3 items. Separate web parts, one's filtered to men's, one's for women, so that each web part slightly customized query. There's another web part that's showing items on sale that are similar to the search term, and up in the upper right-hand corner, jackets was the term that was searched on. So when you just type jackets, it's going to say, all right, here's kind of our highest relevant items. Here's all our men's jackets, women's jackets, some links to some categories you can click on. Here's all the jackets on sale. Here's our most popular and most viewed. There's that, and then that information is actually captured by the search service and can be fed back into the search web parts, content search web parts. There's also search refiners, price, size, color, brand, and there's many ways that these could be displayed. There's about 7 different rendition web part options out of the box that can display choices. You can actually have different size boxes. You can have little slider bars for dates or prices, things like that. Colors, things as you can see here that can all be used. And I can just click on red, and it would automatically filter all the content in all these search web parts to just jackets that were tagged with that color, or just jackets that were available in large if I click on large. There's a lot of flexibility and a lot of power that Microsoft's built into just this one web part. That being said, this is probably the most complicated web part in terms of the functionality, options available to us, and being able to actually master that web part. There's a lot of great functionality there. So just kind of a recap what we talked about. We looked at device channels and the design manager, ways that we can optimize content for different types of devices, mobile devices, tablets, things like that, to doing our development in HTML in the design manager without having to know ASP.NET, image and video renditions and asset libraries to help us better manage images and videos, as well as audio files. But image and video renditions, we can choose and target and optimize the bandwidth use and how that digital asset is displayed on our pages. And then really briefly, we talked about cross-site publishing and the content search web part. Thank you for listening and viewing this webinar on some of the new SharePoint publishing and content management features.
Thank you, Stephen. That was great. And that will conclude the webinar today. Thank you.